Welcome to the Ames Public Library for this program, which is part of the 2026 History Lecture Series, brought to you through a partnership with Ames Public Library and Ames History Museum. I'm Kathy, an Adult Services Librarian here at APL. The library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas, which we do through diverse and inclusive resources and programming. We invite you to join us for future programs, which you can learn more about through our current issue of Page 1, which I have in the back, or by signing up for our events email. For your comfort and safety, if anyone needs to step out of the room for any reason, please do so. We have restrooms behind the welcome desk out here, and we have gender neutral or family restrooms around the corner and youth services in the back. Emergency exits are over here on this side. This room is equipped with an induction loop for the benefit of hearing aid users. You just need to switch your hearing aid to T. I also have a hearing assistance device in the back that I'm happy to lend out to anyone who would like to use that. If you're joining us online, please submit your questions through the Q&A or chat feature, and we will make sure that they are shared with our speaker. For all participants, today's session is being recorded and will be put on Ames History Museum's YouTube channel after the event. You can also find the link to that video and a list of suggested reading relating to tonight's theme if you want to learn more at amespl.org/historylectures. All right. I think that's all I've got. At this point, I will invite Alex from the History Museum to the front of the room to introduce Kathy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Pfeiffer, the Exhibits Manager at the Ames History Museum. I want to welcome everyone again to our annual lecture program tonight and to everyone watching online. We're happy to give this great partnership with Ames Public Library and be able to provide the lecture series in this hybrid format. Our mission at the museum is to engage our diverse public and provide unique opportunities to learn Ames history. The museum has been open for just over a year now from a big expansion and renovation project. And we currently have 2 exhibits up, community gathering space, a reading and research room, and on-site storage for artifacts in our collection. Our current feature exhibit is We the People of Ames, which tells local stories with national impact in honor of the U.S.'s 250th birthday this year. I encourage you to come down and see it. We actually have a Civil War uniform currently on display that belonged to K.W. Brown, and they moved here after the war. And we finally got an opportunity to display one of our most exciting sticks in our collection, one that he collected off of the tree outside of the day that Lee surrendered to Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse. So you can come in and see that fun little 150-year-old piece of wood. Tonight's lecture is the second in a series of 4 lectures this spring. You can pick up a card on the back table there that has the dates for the other 2. Please visit our website, ameshistory.org, for more information about upcoming events, current exhibits, and museum membership. We also have membership brochures available back in the back. Now I will invite Kathy Sveck from the Ames History Museum up to the front of the room to introduce our speaker.
This is the relay microphone here. All of our lectures this year are meant to enhance the exhibit that Alex just talked about, We the People of Ames. And we were really excited to get out those Civil War artifacts that are on display right now. But I also wanted to mention that tonight's program is funded in part by Humanities Iowa. And that is a private nonprofit state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities and the State Historical Society of Iowa. If you go to their website, you can see the full roster of speakers, and you will be amazed at the variety of topics that are available through Humanities Iowa. And OJ is one of our favorites, and he actually returns after several years, actually several decades.
Baptisms of fire years ago.
Trying to remember whether it was 20 or 25 years ago. Anyway, so you can see we've been at it for a long time, right, OJ? Anyway, okay. OJ is a lifelong history learner, former social studies consultant, and media director at Green Valley Area Educational Agency in Creston. He has served on many state historical committees and was a history lecturer, researcher, and adjunct professor for Buena Vista University and Southwestern Community College. He became a Civil War reenactor in 1993 and is the president and charter member of the Army of the Southwest, a Central Iowa reenacting group headquartered in Waukee. He loves history and the opportunity to interact with others of like interest. He is very proud of the group's innovations, dedication to education, and the family atmosphere at events across the state. He is the author of 2 books on Iowa history, in addition to a book on the everyday life of a Civil War soldier, and 27 booklets on many aspects of Iowa and Western United States history, which you can see on the table back there. He is currently working on his latest book concerning Iowa's participation in the Civil War, and he has given over 100 historical presentations throughout Iowa. His most recent project is the production of 4 CD-ROMs containing 320,000 pages of searchable text and 10,000 pictures on the Civil War. He is a contributor to several Iowa history websites. Tonight, he has brought with him a full searchable roster, as he mentioned, of men who served in and were from Iowa in the Civil War. And if you'd like to look up a relative or maybe a friend, the descendant of a friend, you can check with Elaine in the back. OJ specializes in what common folk like himself would have been doing in the Civil War, rather than the traditional study of big events or prominent people. Tonight, he will present in first person. So in just a moment, he's going to become a Civil War soldier. His title, Just Before the Battle, Another a Visit from a Civil War Soldier. Now, you are encouraged to ask questions and engage in a dialogue with the soldier who will stay in character while asking and while answering. And you can do this throughout his presentation. He is dressed tonight in an authentic and the accoutrements. So at this point, I will invite OJ up to the front of the room to give his presentation. Please give him a warm welcome.
With all the introductions, I was going to start here and have you all introduce yourselves. Okay, that was everything I had to say. I would encourage you to go back and see Elaine at some point in time. Just shoot your last name. I originally put that together for high school kids because the deal was, why am I studying the Civil War? Nothing ever happened here, so nobody talks about Iowa and the Civil War. Okay. With that one, all of a sudden, somebody in Newmarket, Iowa, somebody in Leon, Iowa, finds out that something happened back in 1861 that they should be proud of that nobody ever told them about. So anyway, I would do that. I've got 20 years in that, so I want to keep it used. Okay, as we said, once I get started, it's going to be 1865, and I'm going to be 35 years old. So whichever one of those gives you the most trouble, you need to start with that right now, okay? Usually I ask for questions, but then my wife has a fit. There was one time I did that and the questions went on for about an hour. We don't think I ever got out of Schleswig at that time. Anyway, on the count of 3, it's going to be 1865. I would encourage you to, any questions you've got, you don't have to wait until the end, just pop up. We're just going to have a dialogue if that happens, okay? The count of 3, 1, 2, 3, it's 1865. I'm not going to know anything about your great-grandfather being in the Civil War. I don't know how old that would make you, but quite a ways. And I'm not going to know anything about AK-47s. I'm not going to know anything about planes, that sort of thing. Okay, it's 1865. My name is Thomas Goodfellow. And I was born and raised in Rock Island, Illinois. And I was a stevedore for Mansour, implement manufacturer in Rock Island. Well, that job was really going nowhere, a lot of hard work and so on and so forth. Well, that Greeley fellow said, if I moved west, I'd go make my fortune. He said, young man, I was a young man back then, you're going to make your fortune. Well, I ended up in Afton, Iowa, which was pretty much the end of nowhere. The Missouri River was just 90 miles away, and there was nothing over there but Indians and buffalo. So I don't know what fortune Greeley was talking about, but I certainly didn't make it in Afton, Iowa. I spent the winters teaching school because that's when all the big boys came in, so they needed some muscle to corral them. And as soon as they went back in the field, they fired me, and I went back to being a clerk or whatever it was that I could do to make ends meet. Well, ever since I can remember, even clear back when I was in Rock Island, both the North and South had been at each other. All right. After a while, it was like two kids fighting in a playground. They start to believe their own propaganda. They thought we were a bunch of oppressive, nasty people trying to ruin their way of life, trying to, wreck their way of doing things. and were always scared to death we were going to take their slaves away from them. Well, only a small minority of us were interested in that. The vast majority of us had basically the idea that you don't steal my mule and I won't steal your slave, and we'll be all happy, as long as they're not up here, of course. So they had threatened, and we, on the other hand, thought they were a bunch of godless heathens, whiny little pains in the butts. Every time, you know, you're being mean to me. They also thought we were pretty limp-wristed. Now, we weren't sure what they were all about, but they appeared to be good, stout fellows. So over the years, every time something didn't go their way, there was a compromise. So like two kids fighting on the playground. Teacher's going to come by and go, okay, come on, let's give this some thought. So the Compromise of 1820, the Missouri Compromise, there was always some sort of a compromise. Well, after a while, the compromisers either died off or got tired of doing it, okay? Then Fort Sumter happens. Nobody thinks that's going to happen. There's one senator. He says, look, I'll mop up all the blood that's spilled in this conflict with my handkerchief. Well, you could make a good long study on how many handkerchiefs that would have taken with 660,000 people dying during that conflict. But that was the thought. It was only going to last just a short period of time, like two kids fighting on a playground. They both had their chests puffed out, and my God, if we just go down and poke them in the nose, they'll go, oh, hey, that was a mistake. And they thought the same thing going our way. When it finally dawns on people that this is really going to happen, now both of them have their chests puffed out. Lincoln says, because there's nobody in the Army. There's only 15,000 guys in the Union Army, and of course there's nobody in the Confederate Army. And most of those 15,000 guys were all west of the Mississippi dealing with Indians. The United States was far more worried about France and England and foreign countries than they were about anything in here. Nobody figured that was going to happen. So Lincoln says, look, I need 75,000 guys. 75,000 guys, we'll just go down and be mean to them and it'll be okay. And I'm going to list you for 3 months because they didn't want to pay him for any more than 3 months. Plus there's a depression going on. Okay, nobody has any money. Neither side, nobody does. So the 75,000 guys show up. Well, here in Iowa, every state had a quota. Well, Iowa's quota was 1,000 men. Now, the governor being a politician, he says, look, I need 1,000 guys. 15,000 guys show up. They've been gearing up for this their whole life, okay? The last war was the Mexican-American War back in 1846. So everybody wants a chunk of this. They all want, you know, they figure they're going to go down to Missouri, punch somebody in the mouth, get a nice set of clothes. All the girls are going to think this is pretty hot stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yes, look at her. She knows what I'm talking about. Okay, and he's going, yeah, clothes, yeah, that works. Plus, it's also worth $13 a month, which is more cash than I've seen in a good long time. So that was my motivation. But for the most part, most of the guys, they just hurt their feelings. All right, first of all, how dare you break up the Union? You know, it's been around for a long time, and all of a sudden you're just being goofy about the whole thing. Well, the governor's problem isn't how many enlistees he's going to get. His problem is what's he going to do with the other 14,000? And like I say, he's a politician. So, of course, he takes 100 guys from Dubuque, 100 guys from Keokuk, 100 guys from Muscatine, 100 guys from Davenport, all the people who are going to vote for him. There aren't enough votes in Afton, Iowa to make a difference. Okay, so we're going to miss out on this. So everybody in our neck of the woods, which was fairly new, it was only opened up in 1852, is really not happy. You know, we're going to miss this. All right. But like I say, there's a depression going on. State has no money. But the ladies from Keokuk say, all right, once you get these 1,000 guys down there, a regiment, once you get them down there, we'll sew the uniforms. Well, there isn't enough material in the entire state of Iowa to outfit 1,000 guys. Plus, like I say, the state's broke. So Governor Kirkwood takes out a loan for $80,000. Now, I don't know what kind of an idiot loaned him $80,000, but somebody did. So he sends his emissary to Chicago to get enough material so they can sew these uniforms. Because the war is only going to last how long? All right, so you don't need a whole lot, right? That's good because we didn't have a whole lot. So they sew it, and I'm reading in the paper that he comes back with something called pink satinette. And I thought, pink satinette, what is this, a butterfly outfit? Pink satinette. Well, pink satinette's gray with a pink tinge to it. So these ladies dutifully sew these uniforms. And these guys march up and down and just have a time. So they end up down in Missouri, and after 3 months, their enlistment's up. But they aren't going to come back and tell all their grandkids they marched around Missouri for 3 months and didn't do anything, okay? They want to bloody somebody's nose. It never crosses anybody's mind that you're going to get the one that's being smacked, and your nose is going to end up over here where your ear used to be, all right? Doesn't dawn on them. They see a battle. There's an army coming up from Arkansas, led by a former governor of Missouri, who has this notion throughout the whole war that, you know, we're oppressing all these people in Missouri, and if he shows up with an army, they're all going to jump in and become Confederates. Well, okay, Missourians aren't that bright, but they're not stupid either, okay? You're sitting right next to the North, okay? So unless you feel kind of cocky about yourself, you're not going to take too many wrong steps. So they do. They end up fighting, even though their enlistment's up. And up until then, the Union hadn't done well. Bull Run had happened. There was a series of, oops, this isn't working out the way we thought it was going to. But they attack this army, and they're outnumbered 2 or 3 to 1. But they fight them to a draw. So they're big heroes in the Union. So they all come back, half of them re-enlist. Well, by now, it's dawned on everybody, this is going to last more than 3 months. So Lincoln says, look, I need another 100,000 guys, and I need them for like another 90 days. So all of a sudden, then they need another 300,000 about 2-3 months later. Now they're ready for all those hay seeds down in southwest Iowa, all right? They're even ready to take me at this stage. So everybody goes, all right. One night, and they publicize this. There's going to be a recruiting rally. Well, everybody knows who's going to enlist. Everybody's going to enlist. And it's going to be at 6 o'clock at night. And so all day long, the town band, starting about noon, jumps on the wagon and they start circling town. They jump, you know, and everybody who's in favor of this jumps on the bandwagon and goes round and round with them for a while. So come 6 o'clock, the mayor gets up and he gives a speech, and the ladies' auxiliary gets it. Even this guy gets up and gives a speech, okay? And finally somebody says, who is going to sign the roster? Well, everybody runs to the front, all right? Because everybody knows who's going to enlist, including some of the ladies, which, you know, we know women don't belong in the military. All right, so you shoo them back, because everybody knows that the man's the head of the household, right? Right. But we also know that the woman is the neck, and she tells the head what to do. You know, as soon as you let them in the army, then they're going to want to wear pants, and then they're going to want to vote. And you know that's not going to happen. Okay. So I think there were enough, I've seen enough stuff go on that I think there were some women that enlisted. So everybody runs to the front, and they say, well, we're going to give you 2 weeks to get your affairs in order, and then you come back. So we do, dutifully. First thing they do is read us 121 ways you can be hung for something you did wrong. So 2 or 3 of the guys go, no, I don't think I can be that good for that long, all right? Because now they're enlisting us, they wised up, and now they're enlisting us for 3 years because they figure this is going to last more than 3 months. We have no clothing, we have no weapons, we have no nothing. So the first thing we have to do is get a physical. Well, if you've got 2 arms, 2 legs, and lungs, you pretty much win the prize because there's the local physician who's doing that. All right, and you certainly wouldn't want this guy to not be able to go just because. Because the general thought was, if you could work a farm, you could probably be in the military. All right, that doesn't pan out all that well, but that was the general thought. So once they decide that we're alive, you know, if you had your 2 front teeth because you had to tear off the cartridge, all right, if you couldn't do that, now later on, that's a big deal. So it gets to be another year or 2 down the line, and knocking out your front teeth is something that it'll get you out of the Army. Back then, oh, no, you know, you could be on your doorstep. No, I want in, I want to go. So we elect our officers. The colonel, the majors, and the lieutenants, they're all appointed by the governor. So if you know somebody, you're going to get to be somebody. Everybody else, we get to elect. So if that guy there has bought me beer the night before, he's got a fairly good chance. And plus, the only thing I want from him is he's not going to be mean to me and he's not going to get me killed. Okay? So he's a safe bet. Now I can tell who is, actually anybody can tell who won this election. Because this guy is going to spend an inordinate amount of time every night looking through translated French manuals trying to figure out what he's going to tell us the next day. Because he doesn't know any more than what we do. In fact, most of the people I went in with, now I was a city boy. All right, so everything I knew was, you know, you go down the street, you turn left, and then you turn right. This is an alien concept to a lot of the rural guys. Everything for them is northeast, south, and west. So it's going to take a while to figure this out. All right, so this guy here, he understands northeast, south, and west, but he also understands hay and straw. So he's going to stick a sprig of, or we're going to stick a sprig of hay, I'll get it yet, in that boot, and a sprig of straw on this one. So then you got hay foot, straw foot, hay foot. So even him, after a while, figures out that's his left foot. There's also some young guys who have run to the front. Well, you don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but one of the things you have to do, and we took swearing pretty serious. You had to swear that you were over 18. Well, I know that guy is not over 18. But if he puts a 1 in one boot and an 8 in the other one, he can swear up and down he's over 18. And who's going to rat him out? Because it's only going to take 3 months, right? Okay. So in fact, there was, you know, not in our regiment, but in some of the other ones, there were like 2 12-year-olds, a number of 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, because it's only going to last how long? 3 months. All right. Yeah. So here's Mama. All right. Uncle Louie's going, Cousin Fred's going. They go, come on, give the kid a break, will you? You know, we'll take care of him. And he says, oh, yeah. You know, I'll be good. And Uncle Louie and, you know, Cousin Fred go, we'll take care of him. Well, these guys don't last all that long, because pretty soon they find out this isn't a big camping adventure. And cousin and uncle decide they don't want to babysit the better part of their life. Okay, so yeah, they got in, but they didn't stay very long. In fact, later on, I read in the paper, everything I get, because I was way away from far from home. There was a regiment called the 37th Iowa, which came out about 63, I think. And a regiment has 1,000 men. I'm assuming, well, you're all civilians, so you might not know that, but a regiment has 1,000 men. Of that group, almost half of them were 65 and over. The reason being, they let them enlist to free up guys who were doing guard duty and that sort of stuff so they could go up to the front. They called them the Graybeard Regiment. The oldest guy in the Union, actually the whole Civil War, was from Iowa. His name was Curtis King. He was in the 37th. He was 80 years old. They all claimed that they had grandsons and so on and so forth. At any rate, so now we've elected our officers. They've thumped our chests to make sure we had lungs. We've got 2 arms. We've got 2 legs. So we spend the next week or so listening to him tell us what he learned the night before from reading these manuals. Well, we all think this is the dumbest thing we've ever heard. Just go down we'll just go smack them in the mouth and we'll come back. We don't need all this marching stuff. But you're in the Army, so you do what you're supposed to do. All right. And there's 100 of us. We're a company. And we've got all our stuff taken care of. So now they're going to take us out. We have no uniforms. We have no guns. We have no nothing. All right. Because basically, throughout the better part of the war, whatever New York didn't want, Pennsylvania got. Whatever Pennsylvania didn't want, Ohio got. Whatever Ohio didn't want, Indiana got. Whatever Indiana didn't want, Illinois got, and we got what was left. In fact, they tell me the boys at Shiloh, Iowa troops there, got their first guns they ever saw, real ones, as they're getting off the boat while there's a battle going on right over there. Okay, up until then, because the governor, Iowa was on the way to Kansas. So every state was supposed to have a militia. Well, the Southern boys took that pretty serious. Northern boys didn't. So here in Iowa, there were maybe 6, 7, 8 militia outfits. And for the most part, they had the same attitude that he did. If I dress up real pretty, it's going to make some inroads for me. So they would get together and they'd march around for a while and they dressed whatever their mama dressed them in. Then they'd have a dance and they'd eat and they'd go home. All right, that was the extent of their drill. The boys down south took that a good deal more serious. So as people are going on their way to Kansas, Governor Kirkwood was pretty much a supporter of the anti-slavery group. He just let it known the key to the arsenal is in this top desk drawer. So like when John Brown comes through, I don't know if he ever partook of that, but it wasn't uncommon for somebody to head to Kansas, reach in that desk drawer, grab a couple of guns and head that direction. So by the time we come along, there isn't much left. Some of this stuff, 70 caliber guns, we swore some of them could shoot around corners because the barrels were bent. But that was the state of affairs. But we were still feeling pretty cocky about ourselves. So finally they go, okay, we've had enough training that what we can give you. What's your name?
Terry.
Terry. All right. Captain Terry. All right. He liked that too well. Lieutenant Carey. Anyway, Terry decides now we're going to have to go meet up with the other 9 companies to make a regiment of 1,000 men. Well, almost everybody in Iowa went to the East Coast. Camp McClellan, someplace in Davenport, Keokuk. We're so far out here that we ended up over in Canesville. I think you call it Council Bluffs now. But anyway, we ended up in Canesville. And there we meet up with the other 900 guys. So now there's 1,000 of us. Now we're starting to figure out why this marching thing works. Because one of the other things we had to learn when we were in camp is 27 drum calls and 27 bugle calls. Because Terry finds out you can only holler, come over here so many times, and he's going to lose his voice. All right. So now he's got a drummer and a bugler with him, and if you heard da 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 da, that means you're supposed to get over here in a straight line and face him in that direction. So before we leave, it was pretty good there in Afton, because you're marching up and down and oh boy, they think this is pretty hot stuff. So people are bringing you chicken. I mean, you're having a pretty good time. And so as we're getting ready to leave, because it's 90 miles, as we're getting ready to leave, Grandma comes by and she gives you a quilt because you don't want to get cold. And Grandpa gives you a big old Bowie knife because if you're close, you want to be able to stab them to death. So you look like you're pretty well outfitted. Well, about the first time you take a little 20-mile hike, you all of a sudden decide that maybe this quilt isn't quite, what you had in mind. Now, the few Indians that were left between here and Canesville must have thought it was Christmas, because you're just throwing this stuff off. There was just a string of stuff. That ends up being what happens to us the whole time we were in the Army. You're paring down, because you got to carry this stuff. All right, so you're only going to bring along just exactly what you need. So when we get to Canesville, we meet up with our colonel. And our colonel, his name was Grenville Dodge. Have you heard of him? Okay, Grenville Dodge, he's going to do that railroad thing. Is that the dumbest idea you've ever heard in your life? I've never been that far west, but I've been in Nebraska. Okay, and people really shouldn't be living in Nebraska. Indians and buffalo, yes, but why you would want to build a railroad through there is completely beyond me. But anyway, more power to him, because he's probably going to make a whole lot of money off this. Now, he was really good. We only had him for just a short time, okay, because he was that good. He ends up being one of 5 major generals that Iowa produces during the war. He was a hotshot. So let me tell you a little bit about, as soon as I find my pointer, where I went from there. All right, so here we are in Afton, Iowa. They took us down through Missouri, and all we're seeing is a bunch of basically guerrillas. People are pot shotting you. All right. Unfortunately, that's what happens the whole war. Iowa has 4 or 5 regiments, mainly of cavalry, that end up in Missouri the whole time, just fighting guerrillas. You never knew who was going to come at you. And it wasn't just big boys like Anderson and Quantrell. It was like everybody and their dog decides, you know, you're fair game. So they're chasing them all over the place. Meanwhile, we come down through here, and we end up in a place called Pea Ridge. Now, let me tell you a short story, too. Remember I mentioned that first Iowa? That battle they fought was right about here in Springfield. It's called Wilson's Creek. And there's an interesting story there because the guy who is the commander of that Union group, his name's Lyons, and he's up on a hill. And his second in command says, there's some Johnnies, Confederates, coming up that hill. He says, oh, those aren't Confederates. Yeah, it's the first Iowa, they're dressed in gray. They were Confederates, second Louisiana, and they kill him. Okay? There was all this switching going on. We spent some time, because the Johnnies, as we go through here, are starting to pick up our clothes. So you never knew quite who was going to be on the other side. Somebody wearing blue could just as easily be a Confederate, a Johnny. Anyway, they take us down here to Pea Ridge, and we get whooped real good the first day. That Price guy that I was telling you about is now back. He thinks he's going to come back up and take over the state again. Like I say, they whip us real good. I was scared to death. But the second day, the tide turns. All right? Not the least of which, 2 of our guys who are in the process of deserting, a guy by the name of Peter Pelican, of all people, end up shooting their lead general, McCulloch. I don't know what McCulloch was doing out in the middle of nowhere, but Pelican wanted his watch and shot him, didn't know who he was. So this tends to throw him into a little bit of a tizzy. So we whoop him pretty good the second day. From there, they take us down across Arkansas. And the idea was that we were going to take over the Mississippi River. Well, the Johnnies have forts all up and down the Mississippi River. So we start up here, places called Helena, Island number 10, and we don't have a whole lot of problem because we got big gunboats, all right, like portable cannons. So until we get down here to Vicksburg, and Vicksburg had more guns than Carter's got pills, I'm telling you, set up on a real high bluff. You couldn't get a chicken to come down that river without getting blown away. But, of course, that didn't stop us. You know, we know better than that. So after all these forts in through here, Grant tries everything he can think of because Vicksburg's surrounded by swamp on all 4 sides. All right, and then you've got the artillery mounted on the top. So he has us digging rivers, trying to get around so we can get the gunboats through there. That doesn't work. Whole bunch of things. He sends us a place called Chickasaw Bluffs, which is right about there. And there was us. We ran around with about 9,000 guys, 3 regiments, okay? And so on that assault, there were about 12,000 of us. Well, these guys are on a hill, and they're dug in. So Grant says, I want you to take that hill. By that time, basically our real commander was Uncle Billy, Sherman. All right, so he dutifully takes us up. Only when he says, I want you to take that hill, our 3 regiments go up there. Everybody else says, this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. They just don't go. All right, well, we get whooped. We don't win. And so Grant has a fit. Well, it takes Sherman to say, look, these are the only guys who actually did what they were supposed to do. They didn't get it done. but it wasn't their fault. So he let us put First at Chickasaw Bluffs on our flag. Well, if you were the hottest number on any given battle, you could put your name on that flag. So we got our name on that flag, even though we ran around with 30,000 other guys. But we got our name on that one. That doesn't work because the Johnnies cut off our supplies up here. So now he has to retreat. Well, we go back and lick our wounds is what it amounts to. So I thought, well, all right, Arkansas isn't a bad place to spend the Civil War. Well, no, he decides we're going to go do it again, only this time we're going to come around the backside. So they managed to get a few boats down past Vicksburg, and the rest of us come around here. So we fight a whole series of battles. Now we're fighting 25,000 guys from Vicksburg coming this way, and we're fighting another army coming this way. Only the Johnnies weren't bright enough to get together. So we could go beat these guys and then turn around and go beat these guys. So we're fighting almost every day. I say we. Nobody fought every day, there wouldn't be anybody left. Okay? So the long story short, we take Vicksburg after a 6-week siege. So I thought, okay, Vicksburg's not a bad place to spend the rest of the war. And it was pretty well bombed out, but hey, now we control the whole Mississippi. So I thought, all right, we're going to rest on our laurels. No. We now go across Mississippi and we end up here in Alabama someplace. Well, about that time, the Army of the Cumberland gets themselves trapped up here in Chattanooga. And Chattanooga, have you ever been there? Okay, it's a big bowl. Now, you see, too much pressure. See, they told me this guy knows everything. All right, so I'm keen on him, and if he's doing this, I'm okay. If he isn't doing that, anyway. So they're in a big bowl. So Grant says, look, anybody that can walk, talk, or anything else, you get over here to Chattanooga. To make a long story short, we break that siege. And in fact, there's a place called Lookout Mountain. The Johnnies were just all sitting up on top, so all you have to do is just lob shells into somebody. You can't get in, you can't get out. Well, we broke their line, so that got supplies in. Otherwise, these guys were going to starve to death. We end up, 4th Iowa, ends up going up Lookout Mountain. Now, the Johnnies, as long as you're shooting down, you're okay. Well, if you're shooting like this, it doesn't work so well. So we go up there, we drive them off the top of that, and there's another ridge just off the other side of that. All right, and Grant says, look, Sherman, I want you to go to the bottom of that ridge and just stay there, okay? That's as far as you're going to get. Well, nobody bothers to tell us this, so we go not only to the bottom, but we keep right on going, drive them completely off. And that pretty much ends the whole Battle of Chattanooga. They retreat down into Georgia, figuring we're not going to follow them, and we didn't, because it was November by then, and you just don't fight much after November.
When you talk about moving from place to place, were you marching then or in railroad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Walk.
Shanks Mirror. The railroads they had were all keyed to go east. Either that or down in through here if you were down in Louisiana. They're trying to sell cotton. All right, all the rivers run north and south. Well, we're going east and west, but they're tearing up track as fast as we can relay it. So yeah, 4,000 miles we figured in 4 years is what we were walking. Okay, there's only 3 ways to get around: Shanks Mirror, railroad, or steamboat. Well, steamboats weren't going to work because we weren't going south, we were going the other direction. And like I say, their railroads were just goofy because they were all different gauges. So if you went 80 miles, you might have to change locomotives and stock 3 times. On top of that, they're tearing it up so we can't get to it. So marching is about the only way you got it. You remember doing that. Yeah. That head wound is coming back, isn't it? All right. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Did I have enough to eat? Generally. I'll talk about eating later. It all depends what you, it wasn't like mama's cooking, I'll tell you that right now, but no, by the way, when I moved from Rock Island to Afton, I had a wife and 2 kids. My mother stayed back in Rock Island. We ate the best when we were, tell you the truth, when we shouldn't have, when we were down here in Georgia. The rest of the time, and I'll talk about food later on, generally we were okay. It all depends how our supply lines were. Because if they, it took a long time to get stuff. So if you didn't have railroads, if you didn't have some big transportation system, because on a bad day, there were 20,000 of us. So you got to feed a lot of people, you got to have a lot of wagon loads of stuff to get that done. Okay, so we get up here, now we're in Chattanooga. Well, come spring, Uncle Billy decides that we are now going to go down into Georgia. Now, by now, they've moved Grant off into the east. So he's no longer our commander. This is 63. Yeah, okay, lost my train of thought. Okay, yeah, so now we're going to go down into Atlanta. Now, nobody tells me this, but you're moving south, so you assume that's the case. Well, we're faced an army of 25,000 guys, but there's more of us than them. So what they want to do is dig in, and then we're supposed to charge at them. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If you got more than they do, you come around the sides. So they would dig in, you'd kind of play with them for a little bit, you'd come around the side and they'd have to retreat. So we pushed them back clear into Atlanta. But you were fighting almost every day. Well, our army was fighting almost every day. You would rotate in. I mean, as far as actually pulling a trigger or seeing a Johnny on the other side, maybe every 45 days or so, something like that, I might be involved in something throughout the war. Okay, my mother reads, well, I'll ask you. You're giving me eye contact. Silly you. Do you read Harper's or Leslie's? Weeklies. Harper's or Wes? Harper, that's too bad. Everybody makes mistakes. Okay, but she reads both of them. And is forever writing me going, how come your name isn't in the paper? I said, Iowa name doesn't get in the paper, let alone mine. So she sees these things and she just doesn't quite understand what's really going on. All right, we end up taking Atlanta. And for the most part, that's going to do Lincoln a lot of good. Because what we're afraid of when we get down to about there is, after having been in for almost 3 years, that McClellan is going to get to be president and he's going to give it up. Well, I didn't spend 3 years out in the field to go, oh, no, that was not a good plan. On top of that, about here, my enlistment starts to run out. Well, there isn't many guys left back home. They've had to institute a draft. Now, Iowa doesn't have to use the draft much, but over on the East Coast they did. But there isn't a whole lot left because the Depression's over. There's women all over the place. I mean, there's a lot of incentive for not going. But Iowa almost always makes its quota. Very, very few draftees from there. But when we get about here now, I was going to re-enlist anyway, tell you the truth. Because like I say, I didn't spend 3 years mucking around out here just to give it all up. And if I had to rely on the guys that were left back home coming into the Army, shoot, half the time they'd have to guard them just to get them to the front line. They'd have to escort them there because they'd all of a sudden trick-trot out. Now, that didn't happen a lot in Iowa, but it happened a lot of other places. But now they're so desperate for people that if I re-enlist, I'm going to get a federal bounty, I'm going to get a state bounty, and I'm going to get a county bounty, which is amount to about a year's pay. Plus, I'm going to get some stripes that says I'm a veteran, okay? And they're going to treat me real nice. So, yeah, money, yeah, that worked. But seeing the thing through the end, shoot, look at where we've gone. All right, I'm going to give all that back? No, I don't think so. All right, so I thought, okay, Atlanta. They say we burnt Atlanta. Okay. Well, we didn't stop them from burning Atlanta. But the Johnnies, every time they'd leave someplace, they'd set whatever they couldn't take with them on fire. Well, we just didn't bother to put a lot of those fires out, that's all. Because that army that we're facing now ends up turning around and coming back the other direction. They figured we were going to follow them. Well, we didn't, because we had another big army up here. So we keep on going. Now we're heading towards Savannah. Now, nobody tells me these things, but, you know, the rumor mill will tell you whatever you need to know. If you haven't heard a rumor by 10 o'clock in the morning, you make one up and then go from there. But when I get right about here, because we're not facing anybody, all the Georgia soldiers, for the most part, are now over here in the Carolinas or Virginia. Well, unbeknownst to me, we're living off the land. Our supply wagons are just nonstop, back to back, all the way from any one of these rivers up here in Chattanooga, 24 hours a day, just to supply this army. You asked how well I ate. I ate the best coming right down here with no supply lines, because they had a huge herd of cattle and they'd butcher them right in the spot. So it was one of the few times I actually got fresh meat when all this was going on. Then anyway, I get right about here, and there's a bunch of us sitting around a fire. And all of a sudden, this body comes flying out of the dark. Well, you jump about 4 foot because somehow these guys have gotten past the pickets. So this is not a good sign. Well, as it turns out, they're moving all the prisoners from Macon, from Cahaba, and from Andersonville to get them out of our way. They're all headed towards the Carolinas. But they're only being guarded by young kids and old guys, all militia, because all the regular soldiers are someplace else. If this guy weighed 90 pounds, I'd be surprised. But after that, I didn't have any problem burning haystacks and things along those lines. Plus, as far as the eating, as you're marching along through here, because you're in 2 columns, and you're really not faced with anybody other than militia people. All right, so, if all of a sudden a chicken shows up, or a turkey, or a pig, well, they're probably Confederates, we think. And a lot of times they would like go, or squeal at you. Well, so the first thing you do is, you say, you got to give us the oath. Well, they don't do it, so you got to shoot them. So we shot them, all right? What that meant is all these women in through here are now writing, all their men, over in the Carolinas about how times are real tough. So all these guys over here are going, wait a minute, I'm over here defending state rights and all that. This ain't my state. I'm defending South Carolina, and Elsie Mae is not doing well back home. So these guys start to trickle off. Plus, we were relatively sure, maybe we're just hoping, by the time we got over in through here, we figured this is pretty well done. And I think a lot of them kind of thought the same thing. But as many of us deserted as what they did, but nobody talks about that. All right. And I'm not going to talk about it either. You didn't hear that from me. Anyway, we get down here, and I thought, okay, good. Savannah's not a bad place. Because once again, this is all swamp down in here. Well, our engineers were far better than what they thought, and far better than what I thought. They could throw up a span, a pontoon bridge across a river in no time at all. So all of a sudden you got wagons and you got cannon coming across here. So now we're faced with this same army. We were the army of the Tennessee. We named all our armies after rivers. They named theirs after states. So now the army of the Tennessee is now faced with the army of Tennessee, Confederate, and we're pushing them. Well, we get over here to Charleston. Well, we all know what happened in Charleston 3 years ago. If they thought Atlanta was bad, Charleston was worse. Because if they didn't set the fire, we did. All right, they started it. They get whatever they deserve as far as I'm concerned. All right, we keep pushing because there's almost twice as many of us as there are of them. We move up to the Carolinas. When we get right about here, we hear, Lee surrendered, the war's over. Well, if Lee surrendered, who are those 25,000 guys up here trying to kill me? That war wasn't over. It's just the boys in the East were so scared of Lee that as far as they're concerned, their war was over. Ours still was going on. You still had 4 or 5 armies in through here, small ones. But we were faced with now the biggest army they had, about 25,000. When we get here about 6 weeks later, that's when they surrendered.
Who was the head of that 25,000?
Johnston, as I recall. Okay, I just got confirmation on that. Yeah, Johnston. Okay, so he surrenders up in here. Bentonville was the name of the place. Just a little bitty, goofy town. Anyway, but there's still guerrilla stuff going on in here. And I'm no big supporter of that Lee fellow. But when he surrenders up there in Virginia, his generals and his president want him not to surrender this army, but to send him out in the woods, keep them armed, and start a guerrilla war. Had that been going on, I'd be down there for the rest of my life. He said, no, we're not going to do that. You fought the good fight. You did the best you could. No monuments, no nothing. We're not going to forget it happened, but we're going to go back and we're going to start all over again. Otherwise, it's just going to be bad for everybody, including you guys. When they start burning your house because you're a guerrilla, you're going to find out what it's really all about. Okay, so they're going to keep us around for a while, but they decide that they are going to now have a grand march. Okay, well, let me give you my bias, okay? I have a lot of biases. All right. Does anybody know how far it is from Washington, D.C. to Richmond, Virginia?
120 miles?
Good guess, but too high. A little too high. 90 miles. Okay, 80. Divided by 10 and then divided. Okay, 90 miles. Yeah, just what you said. It's 90 miles from Washington, D.C. to Richmond, Virginia. So the theory was that if you took the other guy's capital, the war was going to be over. Now, that isn't true. The war isn't going to be over until there's a bunch of guys out there not shooting you anymore. You can occupy anything you want to as long as there's still armies out in the field. But that's what they thought. That's what both sides thought. So it took the boys you read about, my mother reads about all the time in the paper, Fredericksburg, Gettysburg. The same day we take Vicksburg and cut the Confederacy almost in half, the Union fights a draw in Gettysburg. Who gets the headlines? Not us. Okay, it took them 4 years to go 90 miles. At the same time, we took out Missouri, Arkansas, a little bit of Texas, a little bit of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, a little bit of Florida, North and South Carolina, and met them on the other side. Now, who do you think won that war? If we'd be moving at the same pace they were, we'd be over in here someplace. All right? So this always kind of a burr under our saddle. On top of that, all the supplies all came from here. Well, we're over in here. So trying to get supplies to us, whether it's uniforms, guns, you name it, is going to be just very difficult to do. All right? And then all you read about in the paper is the boys out in the East. What swell fellows they are. So they decide that we are now going to have a big parade up here in Washington, D.C. All right, they're going to get together anybody who's anywhere near Washington for this big celebration. You want to guess who gets to go first? You got two choices. Just go ahead and pick one. It ain't us. Okay, well, this irritates us fairly badly because now we find out that the Army of the Potomac have now been issued new uniforms for this parade. So they've got their buttons shined, they're all set to go. We've been living in our uniforms for a good long time. But we decide, Uncle Billy, not that he invites me to tea a lot, but I think we were thinking along the same lines, that if you can't look better than they are, you're going to look better than they are. So even though look like we've been sleeping in his clothes, which we have been, we decided we're just going to puff out our chest and we're going to look as bad as what we can be. And the next day, after we get done, they say we look like a bunch of lean wolves. And we thought, by God, that was okay. Because we always thought those guys on the East Coast were all sissies anyway. Anyway, from there, now they don't know what to do with us. They're still worried about guerrillas to some extent. But everybody is pretty well going to disperse because they don't want to pay us anymore. The United States has run up a big, big bill. So they take us over to Louisville, Kentucky, and we hang out there for about 4 or 5 days. You turn in your equipment, you wait to get paid, you get your severance papers, that sort of thing. And then they go, okay, go home. So you get home whatever way you can get. As long as I've got this uniform on, I can ride anything that there's an open spot. Now, because we were on the Ohio, they were charting some steamboats. So that would get you at least as far as St. Louis. From there on in, I came up a steamboat up the Mississippi. And that's how I ended up here. The railroad ended here. So I got off in Davenport, came here. From here on in, it's going to be Shanksmere, or if there's a stagecoach coming out of here. Kathy, is there a stagecoach coming out of here tonight yet? You're going to be a big help. You're going to let me sleep in the barn, though, right? That's what you promised me, and you're going to feed me, right? Okay, that's good. Anyway, okay, and I ended up here. Is there any questions about that long 4,000-mile jaunt I took? Yes, sir.
So how many men did you serve with that had been paid by somebody else not to have to go to war?
Oh, substitutes? We had, well, let me see. We started off with 1,000 guys. Altogether, we had about 1,600, 1,700. I never counted, but I'm guessing maybe 60, 70, not a lot. We didn't have many draftees. See, in the fourth, a lot of people went back in again. They made it real tempting not to go back. So like with me, I had nothing left to go back for. So the combination of money and seeing the thing through and so on and so forth. Substitutes, as he bring up, was a big deal. Now that was a problem with us out in the field. Because here in Iowa, we kept hearing stories about copperheads, Knights of the Golden Circle, people like that, who didn't like the war, or maybe they were Southern sympathizers or whatever. We just soon shoot them as we would the Johnnies. Okay, there's a guy by the name of Talley, they tell me, was over in North English or South English, got together, he was a Baptist minister, got together a whole bunch of people, and he was ranting and raving about the war and how you shouldn't enlist. Well, the governor sent down 11 companies, and a shot rang out, and the guy's just dead on a doornail. Nobody has a clue as to who did it. But the rest of his followers decided maybe that wasn't such a hot idea. There were a number of, everybody assumes everybody in the North was all foursquare for the Union, but that's not true. All right, there were pockets. Winterset was kind of schizophrenic. You had everybody was either gung-ho for the Union or they weren't. So you had a lot of stuff, Knights of the Golden Circle. You get down by Leon, places like that. A lot of Southern sympathy, or at least anti-war stuff. Oh, wait a minute. Okay.
Of your regiment, how many survived?
We ended up, by the time we got done, we came home with about 600 out of about 16. Now that's including guys who didn't re-enlist, guys who, our casualty rate wasn't real high, but disease. See, like I say, a lot of these guys were farm boys. I was raised, I had measles and mumps and all that kind of stuff when I was 6, 7 years old, because I was going to school with all these kids. Well, you get down in Afton, and no, they hadn't been exposed to this. So getting mumps when you're 6 and getting mumps when you're 21 is a whole different deal. So a lot of these guys go down with that. Plus, when I first enlisted, remember I said the physical was not the best thing going? A lot of these guys just go home on a disability. Yes, ma'am.
So were you the regiment that made it to the Battle of Prairie Grove, or was that a different Iowa?
That was a different Iowa. I don't know which one it was, but it wasn't us. She's asking, were we at Prairie Grove? No, that wasn't us. There was Iowans all over the place down in through there, but I couldn't tell. I could look it up if you wanted, but back in the cheap seats.
What was the total population of Iowa, do you know, in 1865? Was 15,000 volunteers a big percentage?
Iowa sent 76,000 men. Somewhere between 200 and 300,000. I really couldn't tell you. I could look it up pretty easily, but yeah. Kathy, do you have something? No? Yes.
You consider the Johnnies to be Americans?
Do I consider Johnnies to be Americans? I do now. Tell you the truth, during the war, if I could have killed them all, I wouldn't have. I think at this stage of the game, I hope I didn't hit a one of them. The prisoners that I saw, now I wasn't, the prisoners we took were not exactly the cream of the crop. Okay, so we're seeing kind of the dregs. They were pretty rough. I maintain, and so did a lot of my buddies, that if it wouldn't have been for the politicians and the planters and the abolitionists, we wouldn't have had a war. I think we were all suckered, and that's the way a lot of those guys felt too. With the Johnnies, because I thought a lot of these guys weren't holding slaves. That was all this mentality that, we were being mean to them, and they'd been born and raised with that kind of stuff. Plus, we're invading their home. So I could relate to that. If the shoe were on the other foot, you had Johnnies up here in Iowa, yeah, I'd have a problem with that too. And yeah, I'd probably want to defend as best I could. But they were kind of getting into it. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot your question. Do it again.
Consider them to be Americans?
Oh, I do now because they have all taken the oath. You had to stop it, and the only way you're going to stop it is shoot a bunch of them. So no, we weren't going to go to tea together. Let's put it that way. When you take prisoners, that kind of stuff, you find out they're not a whole lot different than us. I just figured they were stupid for getting into it. But you talk to the guys who weren't holding slaves, that was a big question. So, why'd you let the planters into this? And without saying so, you had planters, you had like upper middle class people, you had middle class people, you had poor whites, and you had slaves. If there ain't no slaves, guess who's on the bottom now? Bingo. They weren't real up for that. Yes, sir. Johnny Reb. That and Confederates is too long a word for me. Yeah.
So, if you don't mind, tell us a bit about your gun. When did you learn to shoot it, and were you a pretty good marksman?
I was adequate. Most of the stuff, well, I'll talk about the gun a little bit, but just quickly, the stuff you see in Harper's or Leslie's looks like you're that far apart. Well, you're not. Okay, those guns would kill at 800 yards, and they were accurate at 300. So for the most part, close range was 200 yards. So at 200 yards, I'm aiming the gun up like this. Rarely did I ever actually see something through my sight. You're firing in volleys and hoping you hit something, because all you're seeing is a bunch of little ants. And if you're in a battle, once again, forget about what you see in Harper's. It's just one big pall of smoke. I could tell you what was 4 foot that way and what was 4 foot that way. That was it. It's all smoke. Smoke and noise. All right. Somebody, yeah. There weren't any. My oldest son was in California. I told him to stay there. My youngest son had gone back east, and my wife took off. I found out about that in Georgia. Yeah, that stuff went on. I wouldn't say a lot, but enough. Yeah, so that's why I'm not in any huge big hurry to get home. I'll probably, maybe from here, I might even go north because they tell me there's cheap farmland up there. And I got money now. I was sending it home, either home in Afton or home to my mother. So they would allow you to do that. Because when I started off, I was making $13 a month. Then I was making 16 after 1864. So the better part, I wouldn't say the better part of that, $6 out of the 16 went someplace else other than with me. This is after the war. I'm headed home.
You, farmer?
Oh, I don't know. It's whatever I can find, whatever's left back there. As long as the shirkers haven't taken all the really good jobs. I really don't know what I'm going to do. Hope I can get a pension. That's what I'm going to try for. Although I never got injured, but hope springs eternal. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think?
I thought Lincoln was on the right track. What are you going to do? You know, you either believe in the Union or you don't. And I believed in the Union. I believed in a lot of things, but I believed in the Union. So I had not only a mental cause, but I had a monetary cause. Yeah, no, I voted for him. In fact, McClellan figured a whole bunch of us were going to vote for him because he's going to end the war. They thought like I thought for a variety of reasons. You know, we're going to see this to the end. They ain't going to whoop us. We're not going to give up. Yes, ma'am.
West of Kansas?
There were, I never saw any, but there was a lot of cavalry came out of Kansas, Nebraska. There was even some people out of California. Now they fought in California, but that's as far as it went. There was some Colorado people, but for the most part, they were on the frontier messing with Indians. A lot of Confederate Indians came out of Oklahoma. There were some Union ones. They had their own civil war going on down there. You had Union Indians and you had Confederate Indians, and boy, when they get mad at each other, you want to get out of their way. Yes, ma'am.
What about injuries? Were you ever wounded, or did you have friends in your company that were wounded? And was there medical treatment? How many surgeons did you have in your regiment?
In our regiment, when we started off, we had just had one surgeon and 3 assistants. As the war went on, they got better. When I first went in, there was no, if you got wounded, you were pretty much stuck out there unless somebody came to get you. Now, later on, they started an ambulance corps. Because like some of those early ones, like at Shiloh and places like that, they might lay out in that field for 2 days before somebody come get them. Okay, because you had multiple questions. That was one of them. Oh, did I ever get wounded? No. I mean, I had bullet holes through my hat, through my coat, but thank God, no, I never got wounded. In fact, I'm given a choice, I think I'd just soon be wounded as I get dysentery or something like that. Those surgeons, I didn't trust them. You don't know what they're going to give you. Yes, sir.
Know what was best for the country as far as the war?
Only from reading. News is news. Well, I assume, you know, if I'm the only news I got was if I could pick up Harper's or Leslie or one of the local papers, or somebody would send me something back from home. So most of the news I've got was pretty much old news. A lot of rumors, but no, I mean, we were preoccupied with what was in front of us, let alone what was going on someplace else. See, on top of that, I knew what was going on the East Coast, which was nothing. It just all depends who was losing what today.
By any chance, go to Andersonville?
I didn't know. Andersonville, by the time I would have gotten there, I heard about it. And remember, I said that one guy had escaped. You didn't escape from Andersonville while it was a prison. If you had a chance to escape, it's when they were moving you. Because you weren't in a stockade. These guys weren't very good. No. Well, you're in a column and you're marching, so you're going wherever they tell you to go. So you're not going to be wandering off and doing this and that and the other thing. Okay, I've been getting the hurry up sign from Elaine. Yeah, it wasn't you. You're off the hook, but I'm not going to stop anyway, so it doesn't care. Okay, let me tell you about what we lived in, what I'm dressed as, what we ate, and then we'll go from there. Okay, we'll start with what we lived in. When the war first starts, we started with something called a Sibley tent. which looked like a great big Indian teepee. So you'd sleep 12 guys like this. If it was summertime, your head would be out. If it was wintertime, your head would be in. There's a fire in the middle, looked like a big teepee. That was all well and good, but boy, that took up a lot of canvas to make that tent. Plus you had to have these great big poles. So they didn't last long. When our train first starts off from Afton, there was probably 30, 40 wagons for 100 of us. Officers are bringing along camp stoves and desks and all sorts of stuff, you know, and we got all our stuff. That everything that just kept getting pared down, pared down, pared down. Then after that, they went to something called an A-frame tent, which was like, well, it looked like an A, or a wedge tent, some people called them. You had the two uprights like this, and you just have two big pieces of canvas that stretch. You'd sleep somewhere between 8 to 10 guys in there, depending on where you were at. So you slept spoon fashion like this. So if one guy rolled over, you all rolled over, which made for some interesting conversations at 2 o'clock in the morning when somebody steps on something that you don't want them to be stepping on. But even that was too luxurious after a while. Now they issue us a piece of canvas about like this by about like that, called a shelter half. And you can either use it as a ground cloth or a blanket or a lean-to, or you could button two of them together and make what we called a dog tent, because it wasn't much bigger than a dog. Someone's, you know, no matter what, some of you was going to hang out of this thing. Okay, because it was only about 4 foot long. So unless you were a midget, it was just something to keep the rain off. See, that's what drove me crazy. I don't like cold and I don't like wet. And being cold and wet is not a good plan. I'm just lucky I survived the whole thing. There were times you go, look, this is not working. This is not going to work for me. Okay, so that's what we lived in. All right, this is what I've got on. And starting from the top, this is called a kepi. And a lot of these uniforms were modeled after either French or German. Okay, so they were meant to look pretty. The hat makes no sense whatsoever. The only reason I keep this on is because people recognize it. This is what you would keep if you were going to have an inspection or a parade. You're down in Georgia. It's 90 degrees. You're out there with 30,000 of your best friends marching along a road for 20, 25 miles. Okay, you're going to come down with heat stroke sooner or later. No protection for your ears. Not much up here. This doesn't breathe at all. It's made out of wool, obviously. Okay, first thing I did was stuff this someplace, write home to Ma and go, okay, send me a real hat. So now I've got what I call a farmer's hat. You've seen the pictures of the guys who do this, you know, with the saber and the two guns and so on. Okay, those were done by daguerreotype artists. The clothes we had, there were no sizes because we all make clothes at home, right? You go to the store to buy material so you can make whatever it is that we want you to make, or you're willing to make anyway. Okay, so if Leavenworth is making this size, that's what everybody got that day. So you just swap around until you find something. You know, if it's too big for me, we'll go find somebody else and maybe he'll swap me for a smaller one. The shoes, of course, are made at home too. So they're made to fit your feet. First pair I had fell apart after about 4 days. So I said, hey, look, what's going on with that? And he said, oh, those are cavalry shoes. You weren't supposed to wear those. You weren't supposed to walk with those. You got whatever you got early on. Because like I say, what nobody else wanted, we ended up with. The only reason we got our first set of guns is because Colonel Dodge hijacked them from Keokuk. They wanted us to go down. The Johnnies were attacking St. Joseph. Well, you got no guns. What are you going to do? You know, poke them with a stick? He gets the guns over. And by that time, of course, they were long gone. But that's how we got our first guns. Anyway, this makes no sense. So the daguerreotype artists had a whole array of clothes. So this is all new stuff. So any camp you were in, at least initially, there's 5 or 6 of these guys wanting to take your picture. And everybody at home wants to see, wants you to look good. So of course you walk in and the guy says, what do you want to look like? Well, a weenie? No. I want to look like a killer. Okay. I never carried a sword in my life, except when I took that picture, or a pistol, or anything else, or for the most part had clothes that fit. All right. But he had all sorts of clothes, so you could look real good for the folks back home. So don't let people fool you. The rest of the time, it looked like we've been sleeping in his clothes. And like I say, we had been sleeping in his clothes. So you look at the real pictures of these things, and you got it. All right, so that's the hat. Now, by the way, somebody asked here a while ago, so what's that all about? This signified that I was in the infantry. That's a French hunting horn. Like I say, that's all French, froggy stuff. 4th Iowa, Company E. So if they saw me roaming around, they'd go, oh, you should be over there. Couldn't hide anymore. Okay, underneath all this, I've got a union suit on. You know what a union suit is? You do. I bet you they don't. Do you? No? Long johns, long underwear. All right, everything is either muslin or wool. All right. Now, some of the guys didn't wear underwear before they got in the Army. About the first hike or two of 20 miles, they find out what underwear is really used for. Okay. From then on in, they became a believer. The pants are wool. They're held up by braces, suspenders. The only people who wear a belt, you only wear a belt to hang things on. Only miners wear belts. You don't want to be a miner, do you? No, I didn't think you did. Okay. They also issued me a vest and a great coat, which is just a big overcoat. I got a muslin shirt. We got an allowance every year of what we could wear. They would give it to us. But if we got our own, then we could pocket the money. So my allowance was $40 a year. So if I could get something from home, I just got this because they were handing them out down in Louisville. So otherwise I would have had a speckled one or something. They didn't care because you had to keep your jacket buttoned all the time. Called a blouse. This is what I would have worn back home if I was doing whatever I was doing anyway. The stuff, oh, shoes. Now you guys back in the cheap seats can't see these, but I'll march up and down just in case. Those are called brogans. Square-toed. Once again, there's no sizes. So when I got issued these, I'd shop around, find something that kind of fit, go wade around in a creek for a half hour and just don't take them off. Underneath that, I've got 2 pair of socks because I knew I was going to have to be walking today. So if there's something going to rub on each other, I want it to be on each other, not on me. If I thought I was going to have to take a long walk, I'd soap down the bottom one. Because if I'm out in the middle of nowhere, Georgia, they're not going to stop this march because I've got blisters. It's just not going to happen. All right, now some of you will know this. Once again, you guys won't. All right, why do I have a horseshoe on that shoe? And the first guy that says because I look like a mule, this woman's going to pay. Why do I have a horseshoe on there?
We're gonna wear the stole down.
That's right. Okay, is that what you said too? Okay, yeah, the last thing I want, it isn't because I'm all that conscientious about wearing out my shoes, but if I wear that heel over, it's going to take its toll on my knee. And once again, they're not going to stop because my knee hurts. Okay, and unless I can find a hospital wagon, they aren't going to pick me up either. So no, one, I wanted to last as long as possible. Two, because usually the answer I usually get is that it has traction. Well, no, it has no traction whatsoever. These are all leather. So when you first get them, I mean, you slide around like a hog on ice. They're pegged together by pieces of leather. So that's what holds the sole to the top. Okay, and the stuff that's hanging on me. This is a cartridge pouch. Before I go into battle, they're going to issue me 60 rounds, and they look like that over there. And somebody asked, what happened, keep your powder dry. This thing has, first of all, it's all leather. And secondly, there's 2 flaps on it. So you don't almost have to hold that open before you'd get any. But on top of that, they didn't want us to run around camp with 60 rounds. There was enough people accidentally shooting themselves without fully arming us and making sure we go. Off to the left is a bayonet, and that was supposed to be a terror weapon. You know, can you see the shape of that? Pretend you can see the shape of that. It's a triangle. All right. If you stab somebody with that, it's not terribly sharp, but it doesn't have to be. If you stab somebody with that, that's going to cut every vein and artery. The guy's going to bleed to death. I mean, unless you catch him up here or something. They tell me that all the major powers are going to outlaw these right after we get done fighting each other over here, just because they're just that lethal. But you seldom ever use that, all right? Because like I say, that gun, wherever it went, that gun over there is accurate at 300 yards and it'll kill at 800. This is accurate at 1.5 feet, okay? If you get that close, you're too close, all right? On top of that, if you're going to stab somebody, it doesn't do this. Your body hangs on to that. You're going to have to kick that guy off. While you're kicking him off, somebody else is doing the same thing to you from behind, okay? So, but they had us shine these up before any time the enemy was going to see us. There's something about being stabbed with one of these that was far worse than being shot with a rifle like that one. Anyway, but it was handy. You could toast things with it. You could use it for a tent stake. You could put a candle up in there. You could open cans with it. You could do all sorts of things. But unless you're just very unlucky, you're not going to stab anybody with it. And I'll talk about the gun in a bit. Okay, this is like a lady's purse. And anything you needed, you're going to be carrying a backpack, weighs about 40 pounds. It's going to have everything you need for the night. It's going to have a blanket, or you just drape a blanket around you like a big sausage and put everything in there. Because if you're going to stop someplace, you're only going to stop someplace for about 10 or 15 minutes, which isn't time to unpack that. So whatever you need, quick, is going to be in here. So I've got a plate, I've got a fork, I've got coffee, I've got hardtack, I've got dried beef, I've got who knows what I've got in. I'm almost afraid to stick my hand in there. Would you stick your hand in there? Okay. No, I just wanted to see what was actually in there. Canteen, that's going to take, you're going to fill one of those up if you're out. You're going to fill one of those up about somewhere between 3 and 6 times a day. It holds 1.5 quarts. And you're going to get that water from wherever. Once again, my mother sees these things. She has this notion that somehow 20,000 of us are all standing in line by this farmer's pump. No. Okay, you got it wherever you got it. And you'd kind of hope it was a running stream as opposed to a pond. There was one time, I was trying to fill this up at a creek. And you skim the algae off the top and you go deep underneath, you fill it up. My sergeant comes over. You remember this, don't you? Okay. Just keep nodding. Okay. My sergeant comes over and he said, "What's that taste like?" I said, "Well, you know, you get a pollywog now and again. That's the way life is." He said, "No, come here, I'll show you something." It takes me about 120 foot down the road, and there's a dead mule laying in the middle of this creek. Okay. So what did I do? I just went the other side of the dead mule. Dysentery is not my idea of a good time. Okay, and I don't go out of my way to get it. Let me see. Oh, this is what I would cook in usually. Now I'll talk about that in just a second. What else I got? Am I missing something? Oh, cap pouch. This is how I'm going to shoot my gun. Powder, primer. That's how she goes. All right, is there any quick questions about what I'm wearing or not wearing? I would also have a gun blanket in my backpack, so if it's raining, like a raincoat, or I could use it as a ground cloth or a lot of different things. Okay, food. They said we were the most well-fed army in the world. Now, I don't know what those Germans were eating, but our stuff was not gourmet, that's for sure. Everything we had to eat, for the most part, had been dead for a long time. It was either salted or dried or something, okay? But they had to get it to us. So fresh anything probably was not going to happen. Our daily ration, depending on where we were at, because somebody asked what we ate, okay, this is what we were supposed to eat, and for the most part we did, as long as we had supply lines. Somewhere between 3/4 and a pound and a quarter of salt pork or salt beef, we called it salt horse. The only way you're going to eat this stuff is to basically get the salt off. Otherwise, you're going to be getting a lot of salt. Beans, because they could be dried. Rice, if you were down south. Potatoes, if you could get them. Once again, you go down south, you might be able to get sweet potatoes. It all depends what the commissary would be able to get for you. They gave us vinegar. Why would they give us vinegar? Bingo. You knew that ahead of time. You were just waiting for that. All right. You either that or yeah, he primed you on that, didn't he? Okay. All right. Yeah, scurvy. Because all right, the last thing you want is your teeth to fall out because you'd like vegetables were not happening. You know, Mom would say, "Well, don't they have orchards down there?" Yeah, and the chances are the cavalry got there before you did. It all depends where you were in the line of march because your column might stretch for 4 or 5 miles. Plus, your commander is not real eager to go, "Oh, would you just hold these guys up for a little bit while I go over here?" It was like a herd of locusts came through. So yeah, vinegar is probably going to prevent scurvy as best you can. Let me see, coffee. If we didn't have coffee, we're all going home. I mean, that was the staple. They'd give you sugar, molasses, all the stuff you actually had to have for about a 20, 25-mile jaunt in the park. All right. And let me see. Yeah, I've got some. Well, if you were in camp, you might have bread because then you generally, if you were in camp, like over the winter, November through Marchish, they would bring in cooks. Now, the only problem with that is they would use big cauldrons because you're feeding 100 guys at a crack. Those are the same cauldrons they would boil the clothes in. Okay, so once again, we'll go back to the noodle thing, and you do what you do. Now you wonder why people came down with dysentery and all sorts of other things. But am I forgetting some food stuff? All right. What? If I could get it. See, if you're by a city, yeah, that works. If you're by a city, you can get all kinds of stuff in addition to alcohol. Or you know, if you found somebody out in the hinterland, like when we were down south, the blacks, they'd feed you for like 10 cents. Now, it was nothing fancy, but, the other thing we got was called desiccated vegetables. We called it desecrated vegetables. They came in a brick about like so, and they had been dried. And we weren't sure what they were, but we think they were like greens and turnip tops and beets, and we don't know. Because the only way you were going to eat that stuff is if you boiled it in something. And then it came out looking like this. So you'd use it for stews and soups and stuff. You didn't actually eat the stuff. And then hardtack. You guys don't have hardtack, right? You all heard of it, though. All right. Okay, this is hardtack. All right, and that's fresh hardtack. Now, that could be day-old hardtack. That could be 3-year-old hardtack. It's all the same. All right. The only 2 things that could really go wrong with this, it all depends how long I've been sitting on a siding. Either the weevils could get it, and the weevils got this one. You vouch for that she can. All right, this is my shill right here. Yeah, the weevils got that, but that's not a problem. You just either dust them off or wait till they float to the top, one of the two. But the only way you're going to eat that, the other thing would be if it got moldy. All right. The only way you're going to eat that is if you boil it, because all that is portable flour. Just flour, water, and a pinch of salt. Because soft bread is just not going to last for any length of time. So you get a new guy. All right, well, the standard joke is the sergeant comes up and says, "Hey, look, I found something soft in my hardtack." So the new guy says, oh yeah, what's that? And he says, a 10-penny nail. And everybody laughs like mad. Yeah, you boiled that down, turned it into kind of a loose gruel, I guess. You know, some sort of flour, so you could twist it around a bayonet, or you could make dumplings out of it, or we ate a lot of stews, let's put it that way. Yeah, the stuff is tough. In fact, one of our standard jokes is that you could stop a bullet. That saved my life. No, it didn't. We just kept that around for guys in the front row. Okay, I'm getting a high sign, and they're going to attack me. Oh, no, I'm getting another high sign. All right, you got to give me 2 more minutes. I'm getting conflicting high signs. All right, how much does that gun weigh? 18 pounds. 15. How much? 26? 12 pounds. You guys need to spend more time in the gym. I can see that right now. All right. Yeah, in its simplest form, this is a powerful slow gun. So if this hits something, it didn't bounce off, it kept right on going. So if you got hit with this, the first thing they're going to do is check. If you're hitting through here, you're pretty much gone. They didn't know what to do about that. All right, they knew they had to get the bullet out. They knew it would probably be gangrene, but they didn't know what caused gangrene. Like when Lincoln gets shot, he gets shot behind the left ear. All night long, people are walking in there, surgeons, and digging around the back of his head trying to get this bullet out. He was probably already gonna die, but if he wouldn't have died from that, he would have died from all that sort of thing. This will go through 6 inches of oak plank at 100 yards. And of course, if they found out that you had shattered a bone, what's going to happen? They're going to take it off, okay? Because they knew if they didn't, even if they got the bullet out, it was still going to do it. In its simplest form, you click that once, that's half cock. You heard about people going off half cocked? Something wrong with it if you go off half cocked. You're going to reach in here. This is the first thing they taught us when we were in camp, how to load in 9 times. Because you get out in the field, you can't hear anything, and for the most part, you can't see anything. You have to do everything automatically. So the first thing you're going to do is reach in here, grab a cartridge, tear it off. And new guys, they'll say, well, how come I just can't tear it like this? See where that barrel's at? It's right up my nose. If there's a spark down that barrel and I pour 60 grains of powder in there, it's going to be called my X face, because it's going to shoot 250 degrees for 10 foot. So you're loading like this, you pour the powder in there, you put the bullet on top of that, you pull the rammer, you jam it down, you come back here, you put that on half cock, you reach in here, you grab a percussion cap that's got a little, I forget what it's called, fulminate of something or other. Put that on top of that nipple. Come to the ready. Boom. All right. And these 2 women are going to kill me if I don't stop. Yes. I could reload 3 times a minute, but I'm not going to hit anything, but I can do it. You know, just because you can't hear if this goes off. I mean, I've done it a number of times. That first charge doesn't go off because that falls off the nipple. I mean, they're shooting at you. So you aren't going, oh, look at that, would you? Yeah, I could do it about 3 times a minute, just load, fire, load, fire, load, fire. Probably not going to hit anything because I'm just shooting. I was more concerned about running out of my 60 bullets than I was anything else. So I was kind of deliberate. Some of those guys, you get out there in a battle, your adrenaline just going nuts. So it isn't like you have to push these guys. For the most part, you have to stop them. Because you're go, 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 get it over with, you know, let me at them. It's a whole different thing than what people think it is. You didn't have to stop anybody, you had to stop them from moving. Yes?
So in war, how many people do you think you killed?
How many people did I kill? I really don't know. I never pulled a trigger because you're in there with all kinds of other people, hundreds of other people. And for the most part, you're firing in volleys. There were a number of ways to fire. One of which is a volley. So you see a whole bunch of guys out there about 600-700 yards. Okay, you might have, say you have got 100 men in a company. You're going to fire a volley, and you hope you hit something. But I don't recall, you're far enough away. I recall in some cases you'd fire a volley because these guys look like little ants far off. So you might see somebody go down, but you're not going to spend a lot of time doing this. Plus you've got nothing but smoke. If I were to fire this, there would be a pall of smoke that come out like this. So multiply that by thousands, plus cannons, and that's what you've got going. Okay. I never pulled it, well, it wasn't just me pulling a trigger. I never pulled a trigger and actually sighted on somebody. I was never that close. Hardly anybody is ever that close. Okay? You know, as a company, you might see somebody fall, but